o'clock bunnies. Yay!
Yay!
Anyway, it's great to have my friend Bar Alyse Rudin. But I want to introduce you, Barry, first to Kathy Ferris, was the one who was just clapping with the glasses.
It's so nice to meet you, Kathy.
She has a show called Ferris and Friends out of the Comedy Studio. And she's taught hundreds of students in the Boston area.
Wow.
Stand-up comedy. And I think we met at the Women in Comedy Festival. I'm not sure.
We met at Ha Ha Mama.
That's right. We did a Mother's Day show together. And afterwards, we sat in my car in the pouring rain for 2 hours talking about comedy.
At a Holiday Inn Express. It was the best Mother's Day I ever had.
Lest we forget.
Well,
and Barry, I want you to meet my other friend, Christine, who, at least Christine is the Ritz. This is like unbelievable. People are tired of hearing me say this, but we went to the same high school. High school in Brockton, Mass. Codspell.
Wow. So
right,
she's like a non-comedy friend. She's your lifelong friend that you brought into the show.
Oh, no, she's much younger. I'm just saying we went to the same building.
Oh.
She's actually very young.
Oh.
You met,
but she has 5 kids.
You met through comedy?
Yeah, she's the queen of comedy in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, let me just brag on Christine a bit, just that the old Boston Garden is now called TD Garden. I don't know if you knew. And she, the Dennis Leary Comics Come Home special, she got a standing ovation from 17,000 people. So she's not bad. You know?
Congratulations, fabulous. And I didn't mean to insult you. I just thought she was saying, oh, this is like a childhood friend I'm bringing in. But that's fantastic that you're doing such big comedy.
Insult Christine. No worries, not at all, honey. Not at all.
Christine.
Insulting. But it's so nice to meet both of you, Christine and Kat. Like you're both new to me, so I'm happy to meet new people.
Well, welcome.
Like 2 Connecticut and 2 Massachusetts. That's
right.
We should have some kind of like, I don't know, death fight or something, right? Like a cage fight, or I'm not sure. I'm just spitballing here, but you guys can do whatever you want.
Well, it's Yankees, Red Sox, right?
Oh, Yankees, Red Sox. Oh, well, I'm definitely Red Sox, though. I'm sorry.
Well, then that was easy.
I grew up with that, so that's. Barry, are you Yankees? I know you grew up in Brooklyn.
I'm completely A sports. I could care less. So you all take the Boston. Like,
Good girl.
It doesn't matter to me. Brooklyn Dodgers. I'm still thinking they're in Brooklyn. You know, I have to remind myself they're in LA.
And Christine's other accomplishment is she has 5 kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I have 2, and so. I give it up to anyone with any amount of children, but each one exponentially. I always think it's mind-blowing that people can do more than what I'm already doing.
What age are your kids?
They're now 13 and 16.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. So you're in there. You're in there right now.
Yeah,
are you doing the homeschooling with them, or what's going on?
Yeah, so I mean, they are, since March, they've been online on schooling. I'm lucky in the sense that they're not in elementary school. So like at their ages, I don't have to sit next to them or do anything, you know, they just do their work. And they did okay. I mean, they both got straight A's, even with it was like 30 minutes a week of teacher and the rest of the time self-study, which obviously, like, if we thought that was good, I would have had like Little House on the Prairie and been homeschooling my kids all along and be out on a boat somewhere for 18 years, you know? But now now it's going to be live streaming online. So like they're going to see what's happening with the poor guinea pig kids that are going back to the classroom, because we had a choice. You could send them.
You have a choice. I feel so sorry for the parents right now. This is a really,
it is a
really tough.
And then my oldest at first was like, I want to go back. He's like, I'm 16 years old. I'm a junior. I can't just sit in my room and the kitchen all day long. Like that can't be my life. And I felt for him. And he's also going to be taking like a really heavy course load because it's his junior year. And he felt like, I can't do that online. I can't do AP physics and math level, college math online. So that luckily after 2 days, he sort of changed his mind and said, you know what, I will do it from home, at least the first semester. So I'm lucky in that regard that we're all on the same page now, but you know, we're going to watch and see what happens. But I feel sorry for all the kids and teachers and staff and, you know, custodians
Yeah.
that have to go back or not
Yeah.
have a job and
Right.
be like in a petri dish, you know?
Well, you
I
know,
would
you
like-
know what I like, I don't have kids in the school right now, but what the one thing I don't see on the news feeds right now, what about the people who are at home, you know, in the fall anyway, streaming Hulu, like Sister Wives and stuff? My thing is going to slow down exponentially. Like I'm not even just going to be able to hop on my Wi-Fi anymore. Why? Because these kids are trying to learn algebra. I have to know what's happening with the Sister Wives. What about that? Nothing's being said about this. Who's not covering this stuff?
You're right. That's such a underreported community.
Thank
know?
you, you guys.
Exactly. Exactly. For us Hulu frontliners.
Frontliners. I love it.
Thank you,
Christine.
Christine, for saving this little premise I had and just blowing it up.
It's a
No, it's true. It's funny. I mean, it's everybody's inconvenienced in a million ways in this shit show, you know?
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, what I love about Barry, guys, is she is not only a comedian, she's a writer, producer, performer, and she does it all. I just and storyteller. I just went online to get a little updated about you, and what a great story. And I didn't know your mom.
You
Yeah,
know,
it was
I
a
would-
great story.
But I would have never put it on there, but the producer of that storytelling show did. And it was the first time I had told it in a storytelling show setting. And it was, you know, it was off. The timing was off and whatnot, but thank you for saying that.
Oh no, it was very well. I didn't know your mom had died when you were 3. That's
Oh.
I have this theory that I think most comedians would agree with is with most comedians there's a great pain somewhere in the background.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that she's actually very funny on it, guys. She's talking about, so then my dad would do this for me because that's what the woman he was dating said to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, I did a one-woman show when I lived in LA called Brooklyn Braids. And it was the first time I was like 29. And it was the first time, actually, Bob Schimmel was the person who told me. He used to say,
Whoa. Robert Schimmel?
Robert Schimmel, right?
Oh, to you, Bob. Plus Robert
Sorry,
Schimmel.
no, but Robert Schimmel, I give him the credit with, like, he used to say to me when I'd get off stage at various clubs in LA, and sometimes when he'd see me in New York, and I was in my 20s, and he'd go, "You're really funny." But when we would sit and talk real life, because he was like a real life guy who could talk real life, you know, he's like, your life is so much more than like the typical 20-something dating stories, And he's like, you need to put that on the stage. And I was like, you know, I'm not sure that I can be funny about my mom shooting herself in the next room and killing herself in front of a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and 6-year-old. Like, I'm not sure that I can make that funny, or that I want to. I certainly don't want to like goof on it, because it's like the most horrific thing that was defining in my life, as well as my brother's, who is also no longer here by the same means of death, unfortunately.
Odd.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of family tragedy and dysfunction. That's all. I didn't want to make that funny, but he gave me the sort of push to say, like, he's like, you have so much more that. And I don't say this like, oh, because about me, I have so much more. I kind of say this maybe for anyone listening to think about their act, is like, I finally sort of crossed a threshold then and found a little more of my authentic voice thanks to his advice. Because first of all, separate from comedy, just like I was raised, you know, in a time where you didn't talk about the like bad things anyway. So we were all like, la la la, perfect student. Yeah. I'm a class president, straight A student, la la la. Like, I'm just like everybody else, you know, that was the thing. And I was, as you know, growing up in Brooklyn and then Fairfield, Connecticut. So this was not the years where it was in vogue to be like, I have problems, feel sorry for me. You know, that was not like it is today, where everybody's like, woo, let's celebrate your hard life. It wasn't like that. So we had to pretend we're just as normal as everybody else. And the family was not, you know, but being able to get to a point where it was like, oh, I can put some of this on stage. And in that Brooklyn Braids and that one woman show, I put some of it on stage at the HBO workspace. And it was like, what's the word I want to say? Like, liberating. And I just share that with anyone else who's maybe at a point in their career where like, you know, we do the jokey stuff and the stuff that has nothing to do with, but when you can sort of bring in, and so I made that show, I wanted it to be poignant, but I didn't want it to be depressing. And I wanted it to be funny. So in that show, like I opened that show by saying, my mother died when I was 3 and I was raised by a single father. And I said, and it's, you know, it was very sad. I didn't say how she died. And I said, it was very sad and hard, but also being raised by a single dad, you know, 3 kids with no woman in the picture. It also, we had hilarity, you know? So I went into the stories of like, the crazy things, my dad dating, my dad having like an Elvis impersonator that he managed who used to come to our house on his way to his gigs and have dinner with us until this guy ended up in jail, you know? And all the just crazy stuff I grew up with. My dad eventually like renting out my brother's room when he went to college to boarders. And the one was crazier than the next. And at one point he told me, this is going to sound, you know, I'm trying to think how I could say it to be okay, but this was in my show then. I don't talk about it in anything now, but my dad, we had this little house, like maybe 1,500 square feet. My sister and I shared a bedroom. My brother had the 3rd bedroom. So when he went to college, my dad, who was a gambler and other things, saw this as an opportunity to bring in some more money. So he rented the room out first to an alcoholic woman who developed feelings for him and would get really drunk. And in front of us, my sister and I be like, just fuck me, Victor. I need anything more than that. Just fuck me. And my sister and I are like 15 and 16 at this point. You know, it was
So
totally
she was a romantic.
She's a romantic.
She was. Once she was literally laying on the stairs, and I did this in the show, where she was like, I don't care about tomorrow, just fuck me. And like, my father also was a total snob about like, you had to be hot, like good looking, skinny, young. There was no way he would have, you know, fucked her with like 10 other guys' dicks. So,
My God.
you know, but anyways, that being said, so I put all that in the show. So you get off so the show became funny. I was able to show all the funny. It was funny. It was also a little bit child abuse, a little child neglect, but my siblings and I were able to laugh at it at the time. So I was able to do the funny things. And the final funny about the boarders was that at one point he was delivering Chinese food. My father, with a master's degree and an NYU education, he was underemployed, as they say, and he was delivering Chinese food for this restaurant. And he came home and said that the lady there needed a place for not 1, but 6 of her Chinese food employees that she brought in a truck or van from Queens. And he said that he offered to her the one little tiny room that had been my brother's room. I mean, tiny. And I go, Dad, it's what, you know, it's bad enough you have Dina and I, my sister and I sharing a bathroom with these strangers. Now I'm going to share the bathroom with 6 Chinese men. And he was like, Barry, they're little people. He's like, they don't take up a lot of room. He's like, he goes, they don't take up a lot of room. We just put a couple mats down and they all sprawl out on them. And they get out early. They leave at 5 to go work at the restaurant. They come home late. And I was just like, I mean, this is what I was dealing with, you know? So I go through all the like craziness of being raised by a single father who was also very different. And then it was only in the end that I wrap it around to how my mother died, because I didn't want people the whole time sitting there thinking like, oh my God, this girl's mother committed suicide and shot herself and they were in the next. So it was only in the very end, I had like this ambulance sound. And then I went into like a flashback on stage and was saying how, you know, every time I hear an ambulance, I think of when I was a little kid, my sister and I, we used to run to the window up until we were about 5 or 6. Whenever the ambulances went by, we'd be like, there's mommy's in the ambulance. Cause we didn't really fully understand, you know, that she had died at 2 and 3. And my aunt and my cousin used to say, oh, it was the saddest thing. We'd be at your house and you guys would hear an ambulance and run to the window and be waving to your mother, like hoping she was going to come back. And so I sort of ended the show there and then went back into saying like how, you know, and, you know, she shot herself. So it was confusing because everyone told us she died of cancer. So for years I was like, does cancer just make you like explode and you have blood all everything? You know, and I kind of ended it like that. And so people had said, you know, I'm proud of that piece because first of all, this was before a time, this was back in, when did I do that? 1998, HBO Workspace in LA. This was before people were at all talking about mental health and suicide. And I'm proud of that piece because it helped me sort of cross over to that, like, there's a way to be able to talk about all the stuff that was funny and crazy, and there's a way to be able to keep the poignant without disrespecting
Right.
the heaviness of, so anyway.
You certainly earned your right to be a comedian.
Oh, I would say,
Yeah, exactly.
oh my God, Barry, that's unbelievable.
I mean, that would make, like,
tough.
no offense, like, I think, like, it's amazing, but that could be a great sitcom because you have so many characters. in it. I don't mean that offensively. I
He's
think, like,
funny.
I can't, but, like, I
No,
have, like,
I'm with
immense
you,
respect
like,
for you, but I also think it'd be a great
Thank you.
sitcom.
Thank you. The bizarro-ness that went on in between. I mean, like, I could tell stories till the day is long. I don't know how, I don't want to get political on your show, but I know I'm not the only one who, when they see Donald Trump, not only just kind of despises all his ethics and things or whatever, but it's like, I know this I know antisocial personality disorder, malignant narcissism. Like, my father was like that. And I loved my father, partly Stockholm syndrome, because it was the only person I had,
Right.
but I loved my father, but like, malignant personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and people now are just hearing malignant narcissism. And I see people sort of not understanding the difference of that and like narcissistic personality disorder or just a narcissist. And I try to explain it like, a narcissist is like every guy comic you meet, actors, models, Instagram models, that's a narcissist, right? But like, narcissistic personality disorder, some people say that's even typical narcissism. Malignant narcissism is that whole other thing of, you can never make them happy, you can never do enough that's for them, and the whole world revolves around them, and any slight or even perceived slight, which is why when I watch what goes on, it's like reliving what went on in my house. A perceived slight that wasn't even meant to be a slight, that's what sets them off. And it's exactly what we see, in our fair leader. So anyway,
Yeah.
so it is interesting because I never thought I'd see on the world stage, like the dynamics that I sort of had growing up, the nicknames, my father had the nicknames for us too. My brother's was faggot, mine was slut, and my sister's was dummy. And I was called a slut.
Abusive.
I mean, it was abusive. I was
How
called
did you end up such a sunny personality?
Do you have any
Well,
copies of your holiday
I
letters?
admit so. Sometimes I'm sunny, but sometimes I'm not at all. I try. I work hard to be, because I don't want to be such a negative Nelly or like a bitter Barry. But
Not at all.
but yeah, but there's times I am. I mean,
I had a good question for you.
oh yeah, what?
Do you have any copies of your holiday letters?
So yeah, my dad didn't send out holiday letters. That wasn't, his type of thing. But like, when I say funny, we were able to turn the craziness into funny and joke about it in our house. And one of my good friends in television that I worked with at NBC, and he met my dad. He finds the stories of my father so funny. He always said this should be a sitcom. He's a
Wow.
development guy. Shout out to Michael if I get him to watch this. But the thing is, it was also, when you tell it to a therapist, I mean, it's like child abuse and neglect. But like another fun story, but I don't mean to make this all about my dad. And he was a good man in his own bizarre way. But another funny story was like, so my dad married my mother when she was 21 and he was 36. And he was a good looking guy. And she had just graduated from Syracuse University on a Friday, and they got married at a Saturday at the Pierre Hotel in New York. Like, it all started really nice and good,
Yeah.
Her parents had worked really hard and created their own business, had some money. Anyway, she died at 29. Now, my father would say to me in his 70s, he'd be depressed because he didn't have a girlfriend, and he had girlfriends his whole life, but he'd be depressed when he didn't have a girlfriend. And I go, Dad, there's a lot of women that would love to go out with you. He's a good looking man his whole life, very funny, but in their 50s and 60s. And he'd go, Barry, I just can't date anyone older than like 30, because when your mom died, she was 29, and my mind is stuck there. And I'm like, seriously? I mean, that's ridiculous. So another time later, a few years after that conversation, we were somewhere, and my father said to me, I was visiting him in Florida, and he goes, I forget it, why this would even come up, but he said to me, you're not my type, Barry. And he goes, no offense, but you're
Oh my
not
God, that's just
type.
like the Donald.
That's why I say it's like Donald Trump, except it's the opposite. It's not my daughter's so pretty, I would fuck her. It's sorry, you're not my type, so I wouldn't fuck you. So he was like, sorry, Barry, but you're not my type. And I go, Dad, that's a good thing because I'm your daughter. Like, I'm not supposed to be your type. Like, and who even looks at their child as like, are they my physical type? So that's why I say I watch this president and this presidency and forget about politics and everything else. I'm so familiar with all of it, the terrible nicknames, the putting down, all of it. So yeah.
Kathy and Christine, did either of you ever do a one-person show?
No.
I do in my living room, but nobody shows up.
Oh.
It's mainly centered around why nobody does the dishes. But
that's a good show, though. I think all
Barry,
of us relate to
I'm curious to hear about your LA days when you were the comedy booker for Keenan Ivory Wayans. How did all that happen? And so you gave a lot of people their start in late night.
I did. That was really exciting.
I know you know a lot of people in LA, so just tell us about that time.
So when I lived in New York, I started doing stand-up at like 20, well, 19 if you count doing it at college in Miami, just trying it, but 20 in New York City. And I was also simultaneously like working at CNN my senior year in college as a freelancer. And so then my first year out of college, I was an NBC page and I was trying to do comedy, like break into comedy at, I would go to Comic Strip was sort of in Stand Up New York. Those were the clubs I was mostly at until Gotham opened. I used to also go to Catch a Rising Star every night on my way home from work. But I mean, I was nowhere, I was gonna be a beginner. I was nowhere near touching that stage, but I would go in awe, just like watching people I thought were terrific.
Did you get to hear Elaine Boosler? She was one of the MCs there, I heard.
She, I think, was already, out in LA by then. But actually, there were several people I thought were really good back then that I just would watch and on go. And they'd say to me, "Oh, so when are you going to get up?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't do that." And they're like, "You don't start here. You go to an open mic." And they brought me to a New York Comedy Club open mic. These two sort of veteran stand-ups, and I watched that. And I love Al Martin and his clubs are great. It's not a disrespect, but it was the first time I saw an open mic as opposed to a professional show. And I was like, oh yeah, I could do that, And so then I started doing that. And then I started doing the clubs. So I was doing the clubs and I was working my way up the production ladder at the same time by day. So after I was an NBC page, I worked on Today's Show. As a page, I worked on Letterman, Saturday Night Live, and Donahue. Because we all did.
What an education.
It was great. And then I worked on the Today Show and Dateline NBC. I was Katie Couric's assistant at the Today Show, like her first year in.
I love her.
Yeah, it was fun. And then I was working on Dateline NBC, and I had this whole crew. Sorry?
You ever have to cock block Matt Lauer?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I was there before he was even a full-time employee. So when I was there, they had hired him just as a freelance guy to do a couple stories. And I can tell you that he was as inappropriate then when he didn't even have a full-time job and he wasn't the anchor as later on. Exactly.
Well, before he put in the lock on the door. You knew it before.
Absolutely. And we all did. And that's what's funny. So I have this whole crew of friends, all my page friends, and that's co-ed. There's boys and girls, but I mean, men and women now, but we are all still really tight and it's really nice. It's a really nice group of people. And we've all gone on to work on lots of other things. And we have these stories and we laugh and about all that. But then I have like my Today Show crew and my Dateline crew. And so when all that stuff was going on with NBC News, and there's only so many things I want to say in case I want to get hired on any shows again. But
right. We understand.
We were all like, wow, we were 22 and 23-year-old girls. And we put up with and saw so much of this shit that is now in the news 2 years ago, we had the same news director, Andy Lack was there, and we're like, it's so sad to think that we all had these journalism degrees, 4 internships each, worked our asses off to get to the network. And when we were there, we really earnestly thought, if we just work hard and do a good job, we're going to be able to move up this ladder. And now as adults, we all look back and go, how sad that like we wasted those years, because that was never going to happen. It was like the guys went from being pages to being researchers, associate producers, executives. Some of them, Jeff Zucker went from researcher to executive producer, or researcher, producer, executive producer. every woman, you're a page, and we have the same background. We're coming out of school and the internships and the whole thing. Now you're an assistant. So now you're answering phones and making hair appointments and ordering lunch. And it takes another year or two before you get to be someone's researcher. It just was like, it was so stacked against women, is what I would say. But anyway, so after that, I worked on WPIX News. I was the writer producer for the 10 o'clock news for Heidi Tong and Jack Cafferty. And at the same time, I was doing, yeah, they're nice. He can be cantankerous, but like I admired him. So, he wasn't like a bully. He just, his personality could be cantankerous. But when someone's really good at what they do, I admire what they do. And he certainly wasn't abusive or anything. He was just, a tough guy. But Heidi was a doll. And what's funny about that is Eddie Brill remembers this because we're pretty good friends, Eddie and I. I was doing one of those New Faces shows at Caroline's. And so my whole newsroom came to like support me. And Mr. G was there. And I don't know if you remember, but Eddie used to have that whole bit about standing out in the rain in the doing a weather, like a weather stand up, but out in the rain. And I'm here, the one guy who's blowing away. And Mr. G was in the audience and he remembered it, that it was just so funny. Yeah, so that was cool. So, and then I went to work on, then I started doing, so I was trying to get into late night. You said like Keenan, I was trying to produce and write late night. Like I wanted a job on Letterman or Conan or Saturday Night Live, and I kept submitting. And even though I had writer producer background and comedy, I didn't have a penis. And I'm just going to say, because that's what it was. If you were a girl, you were not getting a job on these shows.
Are we talking the 90s now, or when is
the 90s? Yep.
Yeah.
Even Bill Maher had said at that point somewhere, I think New York Magazine or someplace quoted him saying, I would hire a female writer or a girl writer if I could find one that was funny, when he had the politically incorrect show.
He said that? Oh.
He literally said that to the press. So it's like, you just didn't have a shot. And so then I was working on daytime talk shows, which is fun. And I've met great friends through it, but it wasn't the kind of material I was necessarily looking to write or produce. But anyway, I did a whole stint with the Carney Wilson show, the Montel Williams show, the Richard Bay show. Actually, the Carney Wilson show is where I met my podcast partner for Community News. That's our little logo. And he's hilarious. And 25 years later, we have this show together and he's great. And I made great friends at all these shows. So Carney, Montel, Richard Bay. And then I was like really trying to get back to the comedy. I wanted to be hired in comedy or working in like sitcoms or late night comedy. So right. I got an amazing opportunity as, I was constantly sending packets constantly to every show and everything. So I get this opportunity to work with Al Franken, developing the show Late Line, which was a sitcom that he had a deal for with NBC. And it was sort of supposed to be like Dateline and Nightline, and he was the anchor guy. So I had some of that background to bring to the stories, and I had the producing background or whatever. So John Marcus was the executive producer who did Golden Girls and The Cosby Show. So he's like heavy hitter. And it was him and Al, and John had an assistant. And Al had an assistant, and then the assistant was leaving, and he was looking for someone who could be like a writer's assistant. Somehow I got this job interview, I think through a friend at HBO, and Al said to me like, well, you don't want to be an assistant, you're already a producer. And I said, no, I really want to write sitcoms and write comedy, but I can't get on any of these shows or anything. And so he hired me and said, well, he said he thought I was bright and funny, and he said, I will hire you in this position. He said it's a little beneath your experience level because you've already produced, and I was going to have to do some basic assistant stuff. But I said, I don't care if I have the chance to become a writer's assistant on the show, if the show gets picked up. And he said, and then, we would look at you as a writer, like a writer's assistant moving into writer. And I'm like, oh my God, the first person who has said, yes, I see a potential for you in this. Yes, you should have an opportunity, and it took Al Franken to be the one to say that and give me that opportunity. So then it was really cool.
A little sidebar about Al. He said to me once, he said, Jane, he heard me and perform, and he said, Jane, I think you're going to be a national treasure in your 80s.
That's amazing. Oh, well, you took it. Yeah.
No, but that's Al being funny too. I'm there like, how about my 60s?
I would take it as him meaning like you're going to be like the Irma Bombeck who is a treasure.
He's actually, despite everything that happened, he's actually very pro-women. So
Yes,
He's
he
so
is.
pro women that when that happened, it was making me nuts because I was saying to people, I worked with him, not for the longest period of time. It was about 5 months, but it was just me, Al, John Marcus, and an assistant named Jessica, 4 people in an office. And you guys know, working with 4 people is very different than when I work on all those big shows with 300 people staff. You don't get to know every single person. This was like, we all got to know each other's intimate, what time you take coffee and what you, all of it. And he couldn't have been more pro woman. And I said to other people, like, I saw how he, at the time he used to tour with Ariana Huffington doing Strange Bedfellow.
Oh, right,
where he
right,
was
right, right.
the Democrat and she was the Republican. So
Right.
I saw how he talked to her on the phone. I saw how he spoke of her when she wasn't in the room. Always class, always.
Yeah.
I agree, Barry.
I think he got caught in a perfect storm, but
Exactly.
I want to hear about you. I want
and then how I got to Keenan, but it's from there. But I do want to say, like, I always tell this story just about him, and I just want to say it because it's people get so hoodwinked by nonsense. Like those pictures were clearly a joke. The whole thing was, we all know, right? But when I worked for Al during that period of time, I wrote this story when people were blasting him, and I just feel the need to say it because there's so much like what's true, what's not true of, a lot of celebrities are assholes, but I will say I've worked for so many like very, very famous people and I've never had anyone do what Al did. We were writing script for NBC. We were on deadline. It was when we had we had one show picked up. We didn't yet have the whole season picked up. He and John were making changes. I was trying to make the changes in the computer with Final Draft, back when it was back then. And I was just learning Final Draft. And he had said to me, if you want to be writer's assistant on the show, you're going to have to learn how to use Final Draft. And I fully admit, I'm like you saw, I'm not great with tech. So I was learning it, but I wasn't as fast. I wasn't as good. And he's like, wait, what you have to shift F1 for italics and shift F2 for character. And I wasn't doing it fast enough. And he was stressed and he's like, Barry, I thought you were learning this. Like, why aren't you? And he sort of like elevated his voice. I wouldn't even call it yelled. I've been around people that yelled. I had somebody who threw her phone at me once and it wasn't Naomi Campbell, but someone I was producing who threw her phone at my head. And I have 2 witnesses to that. So I wasn't even upset that he talked to me that way. I was disappointed in myself because I felt like I was, not doing what I should do. So I did it and I said, I'm doing the best I can. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know it as well as I should. Anyway, about an hour later, he and John had gone out to dinner or left to separately go to dinner. An hour later, he called me at my desk and I've never had any celebrity, any famous person. I don't even think I've had fellow producers really apologize. He called me and he said, Barry, I'm calling to apologize to you. The way I spoke to you was totally unacceptable. And if anyone spoke to my wife or my daughter that way, I would be very upset and I was out of line. And do you forgive me? And I said, Al, you don't even have to apologize. Like, I feel bad that I let you down. I feel bad that I wasn't fast enough with the program. And he goes, no, he's like, there was no excuse. I know you're trying hard to speak to you like that. And I know how hard you work and da-da-da. And it was like the fact that he went away and had the empathy to be thinking about my feelings or care about my feelings, like that just doesn't happen on any production. It was just so, and I just always, not like we're close or we stay in touch, but I always say like, that's the character of a person. Who am I? He didn't need to say that or do that.
That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be said about him because I do feel like he was just bunched up in this whole mess.
Totally
railroaded. And it was like, it was so easy to see through what was going on. But, I will say, he's very devoted to his children, to his wife. Like I respect the man so much. So anyway, that said, while I was there, we were
listen,
waiting.
We're actually out of time, but I want to hear about we didn't get to Keenan. That's fine. We should have you for a whole hour. But tell us about Community News, what you're doing now.
Oh, so Community News is a fictional comedy serial podcast that my partner Adam Brower and I do. He plays Paul and I play Sasha. And Jane, you will especially appreciate this because it's based in a small town called Townport. And sometimes we talk about Townwich, where you live, and Townfield, and it's like all the small Connecticut towns, but it's kind of relatable to anybody all over the country. And then we found the world because we got listeners from Iceland and Amsterdam that love our show, which we're like, what? But we sort of just talk about like all the nonsense that goes on in small towns. We changed the things a little so we're not offending anyone too much and that we can't get sued. But we do take local wacky news stories and discuss them. We talk about, whatever's going on, the power outages, the
I hope you read from the police blotter. That was always a fruitful area.
Right, there was the wacky stories a couple like last summer where there were 80-year-olds having sex in the woods in Fairfield. That was a great episode. Octogenarian sex and so we sort of do like that, but it's whimsical. We play characters. We sort of goof on ourselves as well because we don't want to just be ragging on the town. So we started it with the backstory of us being two stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad who were bored in a small town, and fictionally we say we worked for the small town newspaper, but that we got kicked off because he wrote a story, which this happened in his real life at one of his daughter's softball games. Two mothers got into a physical fight. They were on the floor, and one mother ended up with her skirt up, no underwear. That really happened to my partner. So we start the show out by saying that he wrote that story in the newspaper and that they were all like, you can't write that, it's too risque. And he's like, but we didn't work for the local newspaper, but he goes, but that's what happened, it's the facts. And so then we say that my character was just trying to help him. And she wrote in the comments, what a cunt. And then we both got fired from the small town newspaper. And they said like, what a cunt, literally or figuratively? I'm like, both,
Mm-hmm.
So we then made it that we started our own local community news podcast where we can tell the real stories.
Oh, the real news.
Language. And that's the show.
I just want to thank you for breaking the barrier on this show.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
sorry.
fine.
Oh, it's okay. Christine is dying there.
I know. I was actually going to say I had an idea to just keep this thing going, in terms of the 4 o'clock funnies that we were going to pitch it to the Girl Scouts of America, Troop 130.
Oh no!
And I think that's the one we're going to send them. This is the one we'll send them. So
yeah, you can leave that part out. You can leave that part
We
out.
want to thank you, Mary.
You're the best.
You have been entertaining, and like we don't usually keep this quiet. We usually jump right in, but
I apologize. I didn't mean to be
No.
We love
everybody enjoyed Barry. Everybody enjoyed Barry. I mean, oh my God, you are hilarious.
Yes.
Listen, good luck with community news.
Thank you, and good luck with this
It's a
show.
real pleasure.
And if I ever come back, I'll tell you how I got from Al Franken to Keenan. That was my next stop.
Okay.
We
All
love
right.
you.
You guys.
We
Nice
love
to
you,
meet you.
Barry.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you guys. Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Honey,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.